Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Today, we're honored to have Shel Horowitz, widely regarded as the Sherpa of Social Transformation, join us. Shel has dedicated his life to inspiring change, from his early activism to his groundbreaking work combining grassroots movements, sustainability, and business profitability. We'll explore how Shel's journey from activist to advocate offers insights for today's leaders navigating the challenges of meaningful change. Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Today, we're honored to have Shel Horowitz, widely regarded as the Sherpa of Social Transformation, join us. Shel has dedicated his life to inspiring change, from his early activism to his groundbreaking work combining grassroots movements, sustainability, and business profitability. We'll explore how Shel's journey from activist to advocate offers insights for today's leaders navigating the challenges of meaningful change. Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Today, we're honored to have Shel Horowitz, widely regarded as the Sherpa of Social Transformation, join us. Shel has dedicated his life. Thank you again for being here with us today on Sustainability Unveiled. We're really excited to really jump into the conversation. You've been in the world, for those who don't know, you've been in the world of activism for a very, very long time, going all the way back to your early days in New York and even being at the first Earth Day. So what about those experiences has really set you on this path that has really become your life's work?
Well, I became an activist at age 12, a few months before the first Earth Day, which reinforced the activist commitment and opened up the environmental side of it. But I went to a Vietnam War demonstration, and one of the speakers said, "The Vietnam War is an undeclared war." And I actually hadn't known that. And I had, inculcated all these lessons from social studies class about how the checks and balances work and how the government has these three parts that protect us from overreach of any one part. And that all came tumbling down. It seems just kind of prescient now as we're going through a similar phase as a country. But that made me question everything. So then a few months later, the first Earth Day happened. By then I was 13. And
Much older.
this makes a whole lot of sense. I'm just going to close the door because we're getting some noise infiltrating. But yeah, so those two events kind of propelled me to look for different ways of being in the world and different ways that the society could be in the world. And then eventually finding my way back to the more mainstream business arena, which I was slow to come to. Coming from that background, you can imagine that I saw business to some degree as inherently evil. And it took me a while to overcome that and to realize that business can be not only okay, but could actually be a force for good. And so the real big jump in that thinking came in late 1999 when a developer decided that the mountain next to the state park behind my house was going to be the perfect place to put 40 McMansions going all the way up to the ridgeline and ruining the view and having major environmental consequences. And while all the experts were going, "Oh, this is terrible, there's nothing we can do," I went out and started a movement and we saved the mountain. And that was incredibly exciting. And I thought it would take us 5 years. And I thought we'd have the first meeting and 20 people would show up and 5 would get seriously involved, and we would drag this out and make the developer's life uncomfortable enough that he would eventually give up. Well, 70 people came to the meeting. 30 more called or emailed and said, "I want to be part of this. I can't make that day." Roughly 35 were in the core after that meeting, and we won in 13 months flat. So 1 year plus 1 month. And
That's more than impressive.
it still amazes me now that we were able to do it not that I thought all along, as I said, that we would win, but I thought it would be a much longer struggle.
I was going to say, why do you think it was such a shortened time frame from what your expectations were to begin with?
Part of it is because by then I had a 20-year career in marketing, and I took lessons from that world into the world of activism. And so we had enormous press coverage, for example. We had two local papers that covered us extensively. One of them gave us like, I don't know, 60 articles plus letters to the editor. And we had some TV and radio coverage. We even got into the Boston Globe, which is 100 miles away, but considers itself a statewide newspaper. And so we had that. We had a near consensus that this project was not a good idea. And the developer and maybe 5 of his friends were in favor of it. And like I would go into town hall to get a copy of some document, and the town clerk, who was on most issues not aligned with me politically, she would say stuff like, well, I'm supposed to charge you for this, but since it's for Save the Mountain, wink, wink. So we had allies in unexpected places. We had allies in the business community. We had allies in the colleges. We had allies from local everybody. Pretty much nobody wanted to see that thing built. So that was a big thing. And the very first press release I wrote said, developer's name has wildly underestimated the love that people here have for that mountain. And I was right. So we mobilized that love. And we passed 3 ordinances in town that made it impossible, basically, for any future developer to build on mountains in town. And we did just all sorts of things. At one point, some of our people were tabling at the farmer's market in the next town over, and the developer and his wife happened to come strolling through, and she turned to them and said, "You people are everywhere." I'm like, yep, we are. Get used to it.
And we're growing. And we're
Yeah.
growing.
And
Exactly.
we turned in, how many thousands of petitions did we have? I live in a town of 5,000 people.
Okay. So small
We-
town.
Small town and surrounded by 2 towns of 30, 40,000 people. So the whole county has 225,000.
Oh,
And
wow.
we had literally several thousand people sign our petition. We were able to bring hundreds out to meetings, like hearings on various things. They didn't know what to make of us. They had never seen a force like this in our town's politics before.
Especially back then. I
Yeah.
mean,
This was we did have the internet, but it was early and primitive. We had a listserv on e-groups, if you remember that. And most people at that time didn't even have web access. This
yep.
was 1999 and 2000. So it was different from how it would be today. But then when the dust settled after we won, I started thinking about, well, we did all of these things from the marketing world to make this activist campaign happen. What can I bring from activism into the business world? And that's when I started focusing on this intersection of finding the sweet spot where profitability meets environmental and social good. And it's bespoke. It's different for every single company. It depends on what your core strengths are as a company. So there's a lot of business analysis that goes into any time I'm proposing a solution for someone. And it's very exciting. It's
It is very exciting. And I mean, it makes me think of what were those initial conversations like when you started, transforming how can environmentalism impact businesses and bridging that gap and making the connection. And what were the reactions from the business owners or shareholders, even smaller companies that you were working with that maybe had not ever considered, the work that you're bringing to them?
Well, they were excited by it because number one, I was able to show them the market potential, that the research over and over again, and I've written 4 books on this. The most recent is this one, Guerrilla Marketing to Heal the World.
Yes.
And that one has lots and lots of references to studies of the impact that socially conscious businesses can have, and also of the impact that social and environmental consciousness within the business can have on the business. And the numbers are phenomenal. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Why would you not want something that is going to lower your costs by, for example, lowering what you're paying for waste because you're generating much less of it, lowering what you're paying for fuel because you're using much less of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and also gives you some price stability because consumers are more willing to pay for something that they feel is doing good in the world. and for doing business with companies that are doing good in the world.
That are doing good. I was just about to say that there's plenty of studies, and I know we've covered them too, where consumers are willing to pay more for products that they know are sustainably sourced, or companies that are really, really do have an ESG sustainability strategy and are transparent. They're not
Yeah.
just putting
Yes.
information out there, because anybody can throw data and information up, but the transparency aspect is key in today's world, as I know you've
Totally.
seen.
Totally. And it's also, it ripples through in things like, it's really hard to be a company that treats your workers badly if you're trying to do this stuff, because you have to start by looking in your own backyard or your own factory floor. And also because the employee loyalty benefits that you get from doing this go away if you're treating people like crap. So I mean, there's a,
And they'll make it known. I
yeah.
mean, we've all seen those posts on LinkedIn, which can come across in various ways, or when you're looking at job reviews from people who have worked at specific companies, there are platforms for that now. So
Yeah.
transparency, again, is such a key aspect to any type of business, regardless of the size of it.
And that will
So
only get stronger. Yeah.
exactly, only
Yeah. So
stronger. Now, yeah.
it behooves you as a company head to do the right thing, because otherwise it's going to come back and smack you.
Exactly. And the many conversations that I have had with, whether it be a CEO or a sustainability director or a manager or advocate, is we don't expect perfection. And I think companies, once they realize, okay, we don't need to be perfect, but we can show that, yeah, we've made some mistakes, but we're learning from those mistakes and we're moving forward. And these are the steps that we are taking to
Mhm.
get us to where we would like to be. And we want to show our stakeholders, internal and external, exactly what we are doing.
And to admit that it's a process.
Yeah.
Nobody, not even Patagonia or
Hmm.
Integrated Flooring, jumps into this with every single thing addressed all at once. You start with the small steps and the
Yep.
ones that have the highest cost return, that will start earning you profits very quickly. And then you can use some of the money you're saving to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think most at this point, people realize that the Greta Thunberg absolutism model doesn't really work in business, that you have to give people the credit to accept where they are and that they're moving forward if they're moving forward. And you reward that, even though you say that's not enough and you have to do more. And I'm really particularly concerned about X, Y, and Z. Can you address that in your next 6 months?
Hmm.
Can you show us what you're going to do about that? As opposed to, you're not perfect, we're not doing business with you.
Exactly. Because that's not reality.
No, no.
not not reality. Now, advocacy work, I'm sure, has a lot of ups and downs
Mhm.
throughout the process. And you mentioned earlier, when you are working with businesses, you can lay out all of the data for them to look at as to why they should implement a specific strategy or focus on something like that. But what about, how do you handle the pushback, even if you give the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, all of the data that says, look, your profits are going to increase? How do you deal with those who philosophically don't agree necessarily with what you're proposing to them?
Well, I make the
And
bottom line case. I say these are how your revenues can go up and these are how your costs can go down, and higher revenues plus lower costs equals higher profits, and everybody likes that. And I also remind them that the costs of not going forward are significant, that if you want to have consumers protesting at your stockholders meeting, or if you want to have people boycotting your product because they're not at all convinced that you're doing the right thing, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with the front page picture of your CEO being let off in handcuffs for raiding the company treasury, or getting sued for environmental violations that could have been avoided in the first place if you had a strategy? So there's the carrot and the stick.
mhm,
And the interesting thing is, most of the people who come to me, they don't need convincing. They come to me and they say, I need to convince my boss, but they're in. So having allies on the ground is really crucial. And I went to, several years ago, it was before the pandemic, I moderated a couple of panels for something called the Responsible Business Summit. And
mhm.
I was really fascinated that I'd say 2/3 of the people there were from major corporations.
Okay.
We're talking Toyota, we're talking General Mills, Fortune 50.
Mhm.
Um, they're all in. They all understand the business case. And sometimes I did wonder why Ford chose several years ago that their charity partner was going to be Susan Komen Foundation. There's nothing wrong with breast cancer research, but I didn't see how it related to a company that's
How
focused on
how it
transportation
aligns
and
with them.
agriculture. Yeah, I didn't see the alignment. And I think it's good to have an alignment that, like, if you're, let's just say, Timberland and you make shoes, that maybe you're looking at how you can provide shoes for people who don't have them in some distant country with some of the revenues. And this is Tom Shoes actually does that, and the sunglasses people.
Yes, they do.
There's a lot of companies doing that. And then my friend Dean Sycon, who until he retired recently and gave the company to his employees, ran a lovely coffee company called Dean's Beans, not
Okay.
from here. Not
Mm-mm.
only was every bean he ever sourced of either coffee or cacao organically grown and fair trade or better certified, but he took profits and said to his growers, okay, your village gets to decide on a project with this money that I will supply, and I will provide technical guidance, but you're in charge. And that
Wow.
model he was able to do in places like Rwanda, in places like Guatemala, where there's a real need and where this stuff can do a huge difference, just like micro
Oh,
lending do, except that there's nothing to pay back.
has the person that you are referring to, has he been able to help other businesses kind of set up a similar model?
Well, he's written a book on it called Java Trekker, and Trekker is spelled with two Ks. Uh,
Okay.
that came out like 20 years ago with Chelsea Green. And he's spoken at coffee conferences. So he's done what he can. And again,
He's
now he's retired from the business, gave it to his employees, and is writing fiction.
good for him. He's done what he has wanted to do. He's been successful, and now he gets to enjoy his time writing.
And he
So
had a previous career as a labor lawyer.
it's never too late, right? Never too late to
He's-
change it up.
I love him because he's so ethical that he actually was offered, I think it was an exclusive contract to do the coffee for Keurig when they first came out.
Oh
And
wow.
he turned it down because of the plastic waste. And
I was
eventually
before you even said it, that's what I was gonna say.
he even helped develop some compostable cardboardish Keurig containers that I've now seen on the market. I don't
Okay.
know if he had anything to do with the ones that actually came out, but I know he was working on that like in the 2000s.
Wow. Well, I want to get back to, you mentioned that you've spoken at some of the biggest forums with companies, the Fortune 50 companies. And what is what's one message that you really hope sticks with not just, the CEOs there, but the next generation of change makers that are a part of these forums?
I'm going to give you two messages because I think
Okay.
in the immediate moment that we're recording this, there needs to be a message that you don't back down to bullies and you continue doing the good things that your company has started to do and shown to be profitable for the last 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 years. And you don't get cowed by the threats and the rhetoric and the nonsense that's coming out right now. Hopefully, that is a short-term need. So longer term, just remember that when you collaborate with your consumers, with your developers of products, with your supply chain, you have a lot more power than if you try to do it alone. Just as if within your company organization, if you're the only person championing the cause, it's not going to happen unless you are the CEO. And even then, it's going to happen with great resistance. Whereas if you go to HR and you say, this is how this is going to benefit you, and you go to marketing and say, oh, look at these cool angles we're going to be able to give you, and you go to production and you say, look how lower you're going to have a bill to dispose of the waste, and you build the coalition internally, then you can do amazing things. And then beyond that, then you can become the industry standard and reach out through your industry groups to influence other people to do what you're doing. Yes, you lose some of the competitive advantage, but being first is still an advantage. I think, for example, recycled toilet paper and Marcal, which Maryland, you probably are just at the southern edge of their supply
I was
area.
about to say, I don't recognize the brands, but I will be
They're
looking
very
to
big
see
in
where it
New York
is.
City, Philadelphia, that
Okay.
Middle Atlantic. I think they may go down to DC, but they may not. But anyway, they went bankrupt in, I think it was 2006, 2007, something like that. And the guy who came in as a turnaround CEO noticed that they had been recycling since 1950. They had been making their toilet paper from recycled paper, and they forgot to tell anybody. So he built a whole rebranding around that. Amazing stuff. Pulled the company out of bankruptcy. It became the best-selling recycled toilet paper in the country. And again, this is a regional brand. This is not seventh generation or Scott that's got national penetration. So, and I actually
Wow.
got to tour their plant in New Jersey years ago. And when I did, I stayed with my in-laws, and my mother-in-law said, I always buy Markel because it's recycled. And I thought, well, you always buy Markel because not only is it recycled, but it's right next to the Scott on the shelf of the store you were already in. Because she's
Yes.
what I call a lazy green. I divide the market into deep greens like you and me, lazy greens like her, and then neutral or hostile non-greens or anti.
Non-greens.
Yeah, and there are fewer.
There's plenty of those, unfortunately, that are making their voices known at this exact time when we're recording this
There are, but
at the
they're, I think, a
moment.
small minority. I
Yes,
think they have a
I
lot of
agree.
voice and not that much reach.
I agree. I agree. The plant was an interesting experience, I'm sure, to just see the production. I had the chance to go to Jakarta last year with Asia Pulp and Paper and see their production and talk about their sustainability plan and how they're growing it. It's pretty amazing how it all works together there.
Mhm, mhm.
So
And there are examples everywhere you look in any industry.
yes. Yes,
Yeah,
couldn't agree more with you there.
yeah.
Now, when we were talking prior to this conversation, we talked about how, Sarah and I, as owners of Annie Leader, our goal with Sustainability Unveiled is really to make that connection to the next generation or somebody who might not, be open to this world of activism, sustainable leadership. So for those who are interested in advocacy and not necessarily starting a movement but joining a movement, but they really aren't sure how or where to start, what advice do you have for them?
Well, first of all, if you're working in the business world, use business-friendly language. So you don't use the word activism particularly, because activism, those are the people that are protesting their corporate share meeting. Those are the ones who are writing nasty letters to the editor about them. That's how it's perceived. So I say going beyond sustainability to regenerativity. And regenerative is something that the business world can wrap its brain around. Um,
Mhm.
and I say it's not sustainability is staying in the same place and that's not getting any worse. And that's a good first step. But that really we want to make things better and we can. We have that power. And we see it in, my goodness, when the UN sustainability goals were introduced, I thought, well, this is nice rhetoric, but nobody's going to do anything. Boy, was I wrong. Those have been markers for progress.
Mhm.
And oh my goodness, just steps toward ending hunger, for example, or toward empowering women. I never thought I would see in some of these countries. And it's become mainstream. And it's just mind blowing how far we've come. How now, when I started with environmental work, we were so fringy. And now, as I said, you see Fortune 50 companies having these discussions, not just having these discussions, but having these departments. I thought when I started
Mhm.
this work, I might get consulting gigs with companies like that, but they all have their own staff. They don't need me. The smaller companies, the ones with 10 employees, they need me. They don't have a full-time
Mhm.
sustainability person, and they don't necessarily have the mindset or the resources to do some of the things that the big companies are doing. And so for them, you have to go very bottom line because it's their money you're dealing with. It's not just the company's money, it's totally intertwined. So you have to really look at what are the things you can do that's going to have a payback of 2 months or 5 months.
Mhm.
Start with those things. And then as they gradually come along, I mean, in my own journey, I became a vegetarian in 1973. I joined my first food co-op in 1975. I started my first real organic garden. I won't count the one I had in Brooklyn. Um, That was 1982, so step by step. And now I can actually talk on a deep level. I've spoken at something called the Sustainable Food Summit. I gave a keynote
Mm-hmm.
there.
Familiar with that. Yep.
Yeah, so that's my journey in that particular slice has come a long way. But we just actually um, got our first hybrid car 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
And I
it's,
know you had just gotten it the first time we met. So how has
yeah,
it been?
it's been great. Yeah, I really like it, and it handles way better than our 2012 Honda that we still have. But this is the first new car we've bought since 2005, and in
Okay.
2000, no, 2004. And at that time, the hybrid options really weren't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we've deliberately bought gas cars. It's just we inherited one car and we bought another one used very cheap. And it's just not worked out to buy a new car. But we knew all along that when we did buy something new, it was going to be something much greener. And this is.
Yes.
I just unplugged it shortly before we talked. It was in overnight using household current. We didn't build anything special for it. I happen to
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
100-foot extension cord that goes from the outdoor outlet on my house to my driveway.
Hey, it works. As we said before, we have an EV and we have solar on our roof and we have our own charger that we charge, the car at night. So, everyone can do their part in some aspect. Our big goal this year, as a side note, is to start composting
Mhm.
because we had the space and we've talked about it, but that is something that we are going to start.
It's actually really easy. We have a three-pit system. We dig 3 holes and we start filling one of them and cover it with leaves. And then after several months, we start the next one. And then by the time that next one is done, the first one is ready to put into the garden.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk more off off this episode about that. So you can just tell me what I need to get
But,
and what I
but
need to do.
the point where I was going with this is that all of us can take individual steps. One of the things that I'm really concerned about is the way we squander water. And that's unlike the issue with oil, which is mostly a big corporate use, and we individual householders are really a minor part of it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do our part. I have solar on my roof too. We have our organic garden, all the rest of it. But especially in the Northeast, we are trained from a very early age. Like when we brush our teeth, we turn the water on full. We leave it
Mm,
running for 3 minutes. We waste, I don't know, 5 gallons of water every time we brush our teeth. I brush my teeth like I live in the California drought. I turn the water on to wet my toothbrush, just a trickle, turn it off again, add the toothpaste, brush my teeth, turn it on another trickle to rinse the toothbrush, and I'm using teaspoons. And I think water is a very, very undervalued resource because most of us don't realize that we're even paying anything for it. And what we're paying is very, very little. And so if every person listening to this call brushed your teeth that way, washed your hands on that principle, did whatever you're doing with water that way, watered your garden in the morning and evening when more of the water stays in the ground,
hmm
the impact would be enormous. I don't think there would be a California drought if everybody in this country was doing that. And
No,
that
I think that's great. Yeah.
just so many different, just think creatively about how we use resources.
No,
Uh,
I mean, that was my son this morning reminded me that I had the water on for our sink, but I was in my defense, I was cleaning out a pot and letting water go in there. But, it might even, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that with your kids. I know your kids are adults now, but I'm sure the work that you've done, not just personally, but professionally, has also transcended into, the work that what your kids are doing.
yeah, they both have quite a bit of activity in the social change world. And my daughter actually works for a effective altruism company. And my younger one teaches music in public schools. And
Oh, good for
that's
him.
social change work of a different kind.
As a former teacher, as my husband likes to say, I retired 10 years ago, but as someone who spent 10 and a half years in the school system, I know what he's going through and what he's gone through
They
as
actually
a
use they
teacher.
them pronouns.
Hmm?
They don't go by he, they go by they them.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yes. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. Now, you've been at this for decades. What keeps you going? What keeps you, going to that next project, working with that next company?
I am fundamentally wired to be optimistic, I think. And I've done some things to build that up. You can be optimistic and still get totally sunk. But for one thing, I do a gratitude journal every single day and I post it publicly on Facebook.
Oh,
So I am accountable to my fans. I have to find something to be grateful for every single day, even the hard days, like the day my stepfather
I
was
love that.
hit by a distracted driver and killed. So that day's
Oh,
journal was all about what I had learned from him in 50 years of knowing him. And,
wow.
and it was a hard day. It was the hard day when Justice Kavanaugh was confirmed. I wrote about the movement that tried to stop that confirmation. So if I can't find something direct, I can find something indirect like that. And I've been doing it, it's coming up on 7 years. Another month,
Wow.
it'll be 7 years that I've been doing this every single day.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
So
And
that
how
has
has it
a
really
challenge.
changed? I mean, I'm sure it impacts, the people that read it, but really, how has it impacted you putting all of
Very,
this out there?
very deeply. Because now I spend my days looking for things to be grateful about, so I have something for my audience. And I find them. And I feel like it's made me a better person. I've had a private gratitude practice and happiness practice for decades. I made a decision in the 80s to have a happy life. And I always refer to that as the best decision I ever made. So I look at the world from a positive lens, and doing the work that led to the book and the speaking and the consulting really helped with that also, because I'm reading stuff like what you put out, what Triple Pundit puts out. It's all the good things going on that we don't see in our mainstream news reports. And thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you for reading us. We want to make the world aware of, some of the smaller stories or different stories that they're not going to be able to see and, really hone in on those special projects too.
Yeah. And some of them turn out to be big stories. Arab Spring,
Yeah.
for example. I mean, the idea that a movement that was really totally nonviolent could overthrow, what was it, 4 governments within a few months? It's just mind blowing.
It is.
And there are many, many success stories, not all of them on that scale. But if you look, I'm sure you're very, very probably much more current than I am on the stats of like how much solar and wind and geothermal and small scale hydro have pushed out the oil and the gas and the
Hmm.
coal. It's a
Well,
remarkable turnaround.
and people don't realize this too, that the state of Texas and what they have done in their clean energy infrastructure, it's surpassing so many other states. And when you think of Texas, you think of big oil.
Mhm.
So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of places where this is a both and. China has the most coal plants, I think, of any country in the world, and they're building more. But they've also so much moved toward wind and solar. And
Hmm.
the vehicle fleet, and this was really good because, like, the first time I went to China in 2016, the air was so bad in the cities we were in. And I was there again last year in a admittedly much more rural area, but rural by Chinese standards, which means like there's only 8 million people instead of 24 in the big city. But the air quality in Kunming was not bad. And I think part of the reason is the huge shift to electric vehicles over there.
Hmm. No, I couldn't agree more. Well, so many lessons have come out of this conversation already. Um, I really want to look ahead now. And what excites you the most about the future of sustainability and advocacy?
Wow, big question. Well, first of all,
Yes.
I'd encourage people to go to my website, goingbeyondsustainability.com, to find out some of the things that I've already gotten involved with. But also, I'm thinking very seriously about finding someone like Third Act or AARP to partner with
Hmm.
on a book on being activists in your 60s and beyond, or if it's AARP, it'll be in your 50s and beyond.
Yeah.
And I have my own experience to draw on, but I'm actually the second youngest person in the core of our immigration justice group. And the youngest is my wife, who's 6 months younger than I am. And I have been to two 100th birthday parties for people who were still activists on their centennial birthday.
Wow.
So I have potentially 30 more years to do this.
Which is
So
amazing.
that's exciting. And
Yeah.
what also excites me is how far we've come. I was born in 1956. Not only were South Africa and what was then called Rhodesia, now called Zimbabwe, totally segregated, but half of the United States was totally segregated. Women, if they had a job outside the home, they were nurses, maids, teachers, and that was pretty much it. And
Secretaries. That's, yeah.
secretaries, yeah, I knew I was forgetting one. So that's a huge shift. People of color were marginalized in ways that they are no longer. There's still lots and lots of work to be done. We have not eliminated any of the isms. But one of the platforms that I stand on, some of the ones you'd expect, like catastrophic climate change into planetary balance, but also othering into equity, really making that
Mm-hmm.
commitment to bring everybody along and not push people down because of what they look like or who they sleep with or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the other two are war into peace, which is a big, big jump, and one that we've got like 10,000 years of bad history to overcome. But there's also been many, many successes in that. And when I say war, I include other kinds of violence too. Like domestic violence is a war. It's a war on one person.
Yes, it is.
Um, so there's lots of work to be done, and I am not going to live to do it all. And I am also encouraged that places you would not expect, like a certain very, very large retail store chain based in Bentonville, Arkansas, named Walmart, has probably done more for sustainable supply chains than I have done in all my years of speaking and consulting and writing, because they demanded of their suppliers. And they
Mm-hmm.
are not a tree hugger company.
No.
In fact, I have some serious issues with some of their policies, and I'm not a customer, but I really applaud what they have done on moving the business case forward for doing the right thing on the environment. And I actually tried to get the statistic updated just this week. I wrote to their corporate press office, and unless they answered this morning, I haven't gotten an answer yet. But I asked them, how much organic food are you selling these days? Because the last time I had a statistic for that, I had to extrapolate it and do the math myself from some other statistics I found. But it came to $15 million a year that they were selling organic foods. And this is like 10 years ago. And it was actually, was it million or billion? Maybe it was billion. Must have been billion. Anyway, they were selling more organic food than Whole Foods.
I remember we talked about this before too. I'm glad you brought that up because I had forgotten, which was a staggering statistic to me.
Staggering. And the really interesting thing to me is the people who buy their organic food in Walmart are people who have probably never set foot in a Whole Foods in their lives and are never going to.
Mm-hmm.
So they doubled the market, not by selling more stuff to the same people, but by selling to people who didn't think they needed it before. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. And they've
It's
also they're a real poster child for the idea that you can save enormous amounts of money by doing the green stuff. But greening their truck fleet, greening their stores has paid off hugely in cost savings for them, as
yeah.
well as in propaganda points for a company that sorely needs them because they're not well regarded on labor or store siting or a bunch of other stuff.
Yes, no, definitely there. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'm going to give you the floor for any last minute, um, lessons or pieces of advice that you want to leave our viewers with. And we will have a link to on the podcast page to Shel's webpage along with the book.
Right. It's going beyond sustainability.com. And the advice, first of all, know that one person can do a difference, make a difference, but know that that difference is going to be much amplified if you find other people to work with. Know that you have to target your message to the people you're talking to. So we've talked a lot in this conversation about how to talk in the corporate world about these things. In a talk I do called Making Green Sexy, which is about the B2C, business to consumer side, I talk about the difference in what kind of messaging you would do, just as you would not put the same ad in the National Enquirer and the New Yorker magazine. You don't want to give the same message points to the deep greens, the lazy greens, and the non-greens, and certainly not to the anti-greens. So like the deep greens, you sell the green stuff. And to the anti-greens, you sell the personal comfort, the cost savings, the personal benefits. And there's a lot more of this in the book, Guerrilla Marketing to Heal the World, and on the website. And I'm also, anybody listening here, If you tell me that you heard Jessica's show, I will give anybody a 15-minute consult. But if you mention that, I'll make it 30.
Wonderful.
And that 30 minutes is enough to really get down and deep into what your company can be doing and what your organization, where are the opportunities, where is the intersection with your strengths? And that's a pretty powerful thing.
It is. It is. And I hope people do take advantage of that. Well, again, thank you for being on with us. I hope this is not our last conversation. I'd love to have you back on in the future.
That would be a pleasure. Yeah.
In the next 60
Wonderful.
seconds, ask yourself, how can I contribute to a brighter, more sustainable future, not just personally, but professionally? Let's embark on this journey together and shape the landscape of sustainable leadership for tomorrow. Take the first step now and make a commitment to lead with sustainability in mind. That's all for this episode of Sustainability Unveiled. Join us next time as we continue exploring the forefront of sustainable business practices. Until then, stay informed, stay sustainable.